Thank you so much, Deb, for joining me on Hope Hub. As most of you know by now, my mission is to not only connect widows with each other so that they can feel less alone and that, the feelings that they have can be validated by each other who are also feeling the same thing. But
Mhm.
it's also to introduce you to professionals who can help you navigate all of the things that are flying at you in widowhood. And, at that very initial point of what do I do first to, when you're more, it's been a year or two and you feel like you're a little bit more settled, you're still asking yourself the questions of what do I do now? And even 5, 7 years down the line, you're still kind of wondering what to do. And I think finances are a humongous part of it. It is, and you can probably speak to this, Deb, but it's probably one of the most stressful pieces of becoming a widow. And so, whether you are somebody who's never worked before, whether you have a really wonderful job, whether you got life insurance or not, it's figuring all of that out is really stressful. So I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to come. And in fact, Deb and I will be doing an event in a couple of weeks where we'll be more of a presentation, educational focus thing. But for right now, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do?
Thanks. I appreciate all that you're doing. I think it's really meaningful and makes such a big impact. So my hat is off to you and happy to participate in whatever way I can help your community. So my name is Deb Cartisser. I am a wealth advisor and I work for 12 Points Wealth Management out in Concord. And my mission is really to help women. And in all the things that they encounter in their financial worlds is to help them every step of the way and be a guide for them. So that's really what I focus on. And then the clients, we deal with clients of all sizes and levels of complexity here. And I tend to deal with the more complex clients, but others in my office who are phenomenal deal with people who have more simplistic needs. So we do everything here and love to help our clients.
Thank you. How did you get started in this industry?
Well,
Tell me a little bit about your story. I like to get up close and personal.
yeah. It started, I had a political science degree at the end of the Cold War, and that was about as useful as my napkin from this morning's breakfast. So I got a job at a mutual fund company and started learning about the financial world, and it was interesting, and I thought it was kind of cool. And I shifted from the big, huge exposure into working with a small wealth advisory firm and learned everything from soup to nuts, from grandparents down to grandchildren, and everything you can encounter. And because it was a small shop, I learned everything along the way. So I gradually made my way up from doing sort of administrative stuff all the way to handling the most complex clients. And along the way, I got married and had my first child. And at 12 months, he was diagnosed with a tumor. And we spent about 10 years in very intensive medical treatment. And that gave me my why and who. And while I was doing that, it was really having to learn an entirely new landscape. It wasn't my career, it wasn't my husband's career, but something that's deeply, deeply important. And so I had to go figure it all out. And I never want my clients to have to come into the financial world and figure it out for themselves. I want to equip them with knowledge, help them make decisions, and be that guide that I never had. So that's my why.
Oh, I thank you for sharing that. And it's funny, I do often ask what is your why? And then when I talk to people about what I do, I say this is my why. And you can understand different situation, but I feel that you can understand that like I don't know anything about this. Where do I even start? And I think that
Yeah.
is the common thread amongst, widows. And I'm sure there's varying degrees, people who know more about finance than others.
Yeah.
Um, I can only speak for myself, and I am very transparent that I knew nothing. And I rely very much on my own financial advisor, who teaches me all the time. And so, I always say to widows that this is not something you can do alone. and probably similar to your experience with your son, like that was not something you could do alone. You needed to ask a lot of questions. You needed to ask for a lot of help.
And
Um,
understand the impact of your decisions. And I think the other thing that's so important about all of this is it's happening at a time when you are at your lowest low
mhm.
and you're grief stricken and fear stricken, and the overwhelm, it has no words. So trying to navigate all that under those circumstances is just really difficult.
Yeah, yeah, no, it absolutely is. And so, what I'd like to talk about are three things today, because I understand the audience that'll be listening to this, the widows that are in various stages of where they are in, losing their husbands and or their partners. There are some people who are in that this just happened. What do I do now? What's important? What's not? There is, phase two, and as I call it, whereas, okay, I can breathe. I have an understanding of what my assets are, what my debts are, then what? And then there are for people who are, perhaps a little bit further down the road, call it 3, 4 years, where they figured out how to pay the bills. They figured out, whether or not they need to, how much money they need to make to sustain their lifestyle. And perhaps they want to think more about the future. And, perhaps, if they have children, how to invest in them and how to protect them for the future. And so let's start with the woman who has just lost the love of their life, has no idea how they're gonna pay for anything, has no idea how much money they have. And what do you do first? And
Yeah.
what is it that can wait?
Yeah. So I've taken many clients through this process from the first phone call where I can't even hear them
Mhm.
because they're hyperventilating, and I know immediately what's happened. And in that initial stage, it's really about putting together the very basics. You're in survival mode, and it's getting the very basic information together. What do you have in your checking account, and can you pay your bills? So it's really that simple. And then from there, that's the very first. Do I have access to money? How much? And then it's gathering the documents and figuring out what other accounts there are.
Mm,
And well, you start with gathering a death certificate and figuring out what the accounts are and how they're titled. And if you have an advisor, this is the time to call them. If you have a CPA, if you have any of these professionals, anyone who, the attorney who did your estate documents, these are great people to call and let them know what's happened. So they need to know that they need to rally around you and start supporting you and putting together your next step. So if you already have this team, it's time to use them. And the financial advisor is kind of the natural person to be the point person there just because of how people get paid. Attorneys get paid by the hour, so you don't want to call them up and ask long-winded questions. You want to be really careful with your time there. And then the CPAs are similar in terms of how they charge, and the financial advisor typically charges on assets under management, although not always. So rallying your team, getting them together, telling them what's happened, and then relying on them for support. And if you don't have them, then the next thing I would do is to find out where your assets are held. If they're at Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard, they often have resources that are available. I'd make use of those.
mm.
And along the lines of next steps, you're going to have to be gathering death certificates and getting court appointments and things like that. And I can go into that level of detail if you want me to. If you want me to glaze over it, I can. So you tell me.
I think again, having been that new widow and talking about finding out where everything is, um, and I'll tell you a funny story of how do I even know that? And so for me, it took a little time until the statements came in the mail
Yeah.
to know, oh, we have money in Vanguard or Fidelity or whatnot. And then having to, I like that I love that you talked about the death certificate part is you will call them and you will tell them what happens. And the first thing they will say is, can you send me a death certificate?
Right.
And then they will be able to start to gather. And so the reason I'm sharing that, personal story for me is it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it
It
takes
is
weeks.
not, and I think the other, kind of, I don't know if you call this funny, but I do know that myself and my widow community often laugh about it is this idea of, I don't know any of my husband's passwords.
Mm.
And I laugh saying it because I had asked somebody once for I said, if we could, who are the people we want to have on this live stream and have conversations with? And someone said, can we find a computer hacker who can help us hack into our husband's computers to get their passwords? And I said, I think that's a possibility. But it
You know
is,
what?
it's a reality.
Yeah, but
It is a
I would look for things like LastPass and Keeper and those password managers because chances are if your husband had a job where he had to be in a lot of different systems, he probably had something like that because you can't store it in your head anymore. So I would look for those things and you might get easy access from the phone if you can get in there. So those are places to start. Another place to get information is the tax return. So get out your tax return. It'll
Oh.
tell you where you have accounts because it'll line item list them where you're getting interest and income from. So that's another place. It won't tell you how much you have, but it'll tell you what accounts you have. And another, it's really impossible to read a tax return if you've never read one before. So call your CPA if you have one. This is where you start to get help and you don't know where to go or what to do. So if you have advisors, call them and they should be helping you every step of the way.
That's really wonderful advice that I, would not have thought of is the tax return. And, if you're sitting here listening to this and thinking, I don't have a team, I don't have a CPA, I don't have, um, that's why this platform exists.
Yeah.
There are resources here. Use Deb as a resource. Other people on here is that my hope is to, again, I said it in the beginning, is not to just connect you with each other, but also to connect you with resources. And it's the time to drop your self-resilience mode and
Yes.
reach out and ask for help because as Deb just said, I reading a tax return is probably, not something that you're equipped to do.
But you'll figure it out. And that's the
But
beauty of women and resilience and we figure it out. It's what we do. So you'll go page by page in the tax return and you'll come to one of the schedules. And I don't do taxes, so I can't tell you which one it is, but you'll see it. It'll say dividends and interest, and you'll see all the things. You'll find more things in there. So, put sticky notes on things and so you can ask questions if someone's helping with this. And if you did your own taxes and your partner was doing your taxes, it's on TurboTax. It'll be there. It lives in there. So if you can get the password reset, that'll
yeah,
be a good thing
that's
to do.
that's really great advice because I think, it's I don't know is a common and don't, again, you work with a lot of women and I'm sure you've seen this is the how do I not know this?
Oh my
This
gosh.
kind
And I want to absolve everybody from that thought right off the bat because if you're doing the finances and you're the partner who's doing it, but we work in a really fast-paced, high stress lifestyle, all of us. I don't care what your life is, it's all of those things. And we have to have division of labor or we'll both fall down and be crippled from it all. So there's division of labor. And if you're not the one doing it, you don't know. And if you're not involved and you don't have an advisor and you don't have a regular meeting, you don't know. And even if you do have those things, you still don't know. And when this hits, you really don't know.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for validating that. As I often do as well, it's okay not to know.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually was talking to a woman this morning and I was like, would your husband know what after school activities your kid needed to go to?
Right. Right.
Mine definitely would not have. And so there's that division of labor there is that,
Exactly.
like we all have our roles in our families. And so
Exactly.
um
Exactly.
so moving on to, okay, I know where all of my money is. I know how much I have. There might be some debt somewhere, there might be some savings somewhere, or I don't have anything. And so I'm trying to make a plan.
Yeah.
And so how would you start when you're working with a client on making that plan? Are there steps that you take when, you're looking at everything, at a table or whatever it is, everything's spread out and you're looking at all the things and, you're starting to work with that person on, okay, let's make a plan.
Yeah, yeah. I think in my experience has been that the first year is the whole experience of just trying to get this figured out and drinking from a fire hose at it. And also, and I don't care if you know where everything is, you're still in this mode. And it's also you're filing an estate tax return or your final tax return. So you're gathering all those things together. You're re-registering all the accounts. You're taking care of those pieces. So the first year is so intensive in terms of all the things you have to do. And so I think of that first year as the first phase. And at the end of the first year, I usually have my clients to understand what they have and where it is. And then we work on the setup piece for them. And so after the first year, we're starting to work on the plan. And that is, what is your budget in your current lifestyle? Is it affordable? Are there changes that have to be made? So really getting a handle on what it is that you need for a year's worth of just living. Forget the vacations, forget fancy gifts, forget all those things. What do you need for just your basic budget? And I hate the word budget because it implies restriction, and I don't mean it that way. It's just really understanding your expenses and what do you need to keep going.
Right.
And
I
then,
love the word budget. Um,
well,
um,
I like it, but most people don't that I speak with. So,
Yeah, no, no, no. I think because again, I'm someone that I need a plan, and that to me represents a plan, and it's why I
yeah,
asked that question in the way. But I so appreciate that feedback of time and
yeah,
that permission that this takes time.
it
And
does.
you're right. It's so, you're waiting for those bills to come to know how much they are. I didn't know how much my internet cost or my cable or, and I was, it was a lot of information gathering. And, I don't know that it took me a year necessarily, but it takes a long time to really be able to have all of that information. And
Yeah,
it takes you emotionally a year to feel clear enough
yeah.
that you can say, okay, now let's figure out what's going to happen. And I get these frantic calls of, my husband died a week ago. How am I going to pay the mortgage?
Yeah, that's so hard. So
And
you asked a question a minute ago, and I'm interrupting. So sorry.
oh yeah, go ahead.
And it was, what do I do if I have nothing?
Mm,
And that one I'm not as experienced in working with, but I can say that understanding what you can afford is really important, and that's a big first year step. And of course, I have no water. Excuse
oh
me.
no,
All good. Um,
here,
and so figuring out what
virtual
your
water.
options are and how to, can you downsize? Can you take a reverse mortgage on your house? Is there, oh, do you have equity? All those things. And what can you do to restructure? This is where I would get help.
Yeah,
And I would get help to work with the debt. I'd get help to work with um, restructuring things and what you need to do. And this is where I'd call in uh, probably a either consumer loan people who help with that.
hmm,
I might, if it's refinancing a house or um, getting out a line of credit to keep you in your house for a year or so, I might go to the bank for that. So finding out what those resources are. And the year piece is really more about getting to stability. And you've revamped things, you've gotten to the place, and now you're working on you in that
right, right.
1 year forward place.
Right. And that's another thing that I have found for the most part, not always, but if the mortgage example, if you know your bank where you have your mortgage from and you call them and you tell them what happened, they are 99% of the time willing to work with you and have a
Yeah.
conversation. And it's funny, we all talk about COVID as like the like scary place, but I think, and maybe I don't know if you have any feedback on this, but I have found that people are much more forgiving because there was a period of time where nobody could pay their mortgage because nobody was working.
Right, right, right.
And so, as I talk to other widows who are talking to their banks, they may be able to forgive a month or two, or they might be able to push it down a month or two and then figure it out.
Yeah,
You're not going to get kicked out of your house because you can't pay their mortgage that first month.
right, right.
And so again, it's asking for help is really, the common thread through all of this. And so, again, now we're clear. Now we know what we owe. Now we know what we have, and perhaps, perhaps we have some extra money. Perhaps, we are getting Social Security for our children and are not needing to use all of it.
Mm,
I know that's something that I hear a lot. Or you got life insurance. It might not have been a lot, but it was something.
yeah.
And so now that you understand your budget and what you owe and what you have, what then? Like if I want to again start to plan for the be more planful in that, that kind of extra that you have, what would you, where would you start there?
I'm going to jump back and just mention a detail here. Filing for Social Security when you have kids who are under age 18 or haven't finished high school is super important
Mhm.
because it doesn't start on the date of death. It starts when you file. So file that as soon as you have a death certificate. That's the first thing to do. Get that money coming in. Um, and then it's a matter of starting and I think it's really important to talk about the fact that you can't really do long-term planning in your head yet at this phase. At least I couldn't. I'm not in the same situation, but in that you're still in grief and fear, and all those things have such an influence over you that safety is your most important concern for you and your family. And in that first, after you've gone through that first period and things are more settled and you're starting to get a hang of it, I would want to work on some forecasting. So for my clients, it's really a matter of seeing what do they have, what are they spending, and then how does that project out? Because then we're going to be able to answer some more questions. Do I have to work? Can I can I get through retirement on what I have? What does that look like? And if I can't, what do I need to fill in? What do I have to backfill to make it each year and to make it through and to retirement? So it's starting to figure out where does your money need to go because money is really green, crinkly paper until we give it a job, and then it becomes energy, right? It's a something. So starting to think about what do you need to keep in place to keep you and your family safe? It's probably some life insurance on you.
Mhm.
It's probably maybe and it depends for each situation, but it's really looking at risks, making sure that you don't have some glaring risk like a favorite I like to talk about is the family second home where you're renting it out to people or your kids' college friends come up there on spring break and go wild. That's liability. So you want to make sure that that's taken care of so that you're not going to have any holes in the floor that you fall through. And then it's really planning for your goals and your dreams and what you want for you. And as you said before, your kids, college, those kinds of things, and figuring out what do you have in place and what does it cover? And then what do you need to supplement it with? So this is where a planner can really help you with those things. And it's keep in mind that it's not getting a financial plan, it's really setting you up for that moment. And then next year, something else changes. And next year, you hit the lottery, and it's a state of flux and change. So your plan needs to flux and change with it.
Right.
I think that's really important. So,
Right.
and starting to think about what do you need for you?
Yes. And I think those are all incredibly important points. One thing in particular that stood out to me is, what are your goals? What are your hopes for yourself? And just because your husband dies or your partner dies doesn't mean those things go away. you are still allowed to have hopes and goals for
Yeah.
yourself. It might be a little messy getting to the point to either believe that or to figure out what they are because those have changed. You might
Mhm.
have planned to take a trip to Europe every year with your husband and all of a sudden he's not here, or that your kid, and your kid was going to go to college at X school that cost $80,000 a year, and
Mhm.
they can no longer do that.
Yeah.
And so, there is, I think an acceptance piece of having what you have and knowing where it's going, but you can still have hopes and dreams and you can still achieve things. And I think that's where people like you, Deb, really come into the picture by, asking those questions, what are your hopes and dreams? Um,
Well, and for me, having gone through what we went through, there was a time frame where I couldn't. So I like to ask people like, what do you love? What fills you up? What makes you just glow and feel happy, even if it only lasts for a short time. And when I was in the thick of it, I couldn't tell you what I loved. I couldn't tell you beyond a really good cup of tea, fuzzy socks, and a really nice blanket. Like that was as far as I could get. And that's okay. It's sort of like you start with what will help me feel better now. And
mhm.
then you can get to what do I need to sustain this? Now I'm a single parent and I have to keep everybody going, including myself. What do I need to sustain myself to be able to do that? And then it gets to start to be more about, oh, well, I get recharged when I'm with my friends. Maybe I could have someone come watch my kids and I could have a weekend away and I could start doing. So starting to put like those little incremental pieces into your life
Mhm.
matters. And it doesn't have to be, well, this is my long-term plan and my purpose in life and all those things. It doesn't have to be grand. You can start with really little things. What fills me up, what helps me get through the day, what makes me feel better, and then go from there.
Yeah. And I think those things are even important in the very, very beginning. It could be,
Yeah.
I like to go to the movies. And so setting aside $12 a month so that you can go to the movies. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a grandiose thing, but taking care of yourself through all of this is incredibly important.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much. I feel like we could talk forever. But I do want to keep it bite-sized enough that people watch and they feel, like they're getting, a little bit of information that they didn't have before. And that's really my goal with doing these conversations, is to provide people some information. And I learned a lot too. I think the tax to return thing is genius. The Social Security thing too. That's a really important piece of it that I tell people all the time is
Yeah.
go file immediately.
And change
Um,
change your beneficiaries immediately on your accounts. Worry about
mm.
your husband's later and work on your own estate plan. So those are the other things that I would say in the first year, you've got to get that done.
And if you have no idea what an estate plan is, that's perfectly fine too. I am happy to connect you, or just go on to Hope Hub and there are resources. I've been working with a woman named Julia Abbott who's amazing. She, like Deb, and these are, the types of people I like to find are people who work with women, who work with, single women, and who've heard it all before. You are not the only one who
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going through this. And if that's, gives you any comfort, which I hope it does, then, just knowing that there are people out there, like Deb who can help you. So thank you so much, for joining. And again, Deb and I will be doing, an event the end of March. I believe it's the 31st. The information will be up on Hope Hub in the next week or so. And you can RSVP and it will send you an email and you can put it in your calendar. It's super easy. And during that time, we'll learn a little bit more. Hopefully we'll leave a little time for Q&A, and Deb's information is also on Hope Hub if you want to reach out directly, to her. And so again, thank you so much for, you know, for giving us the space to, to not only figure out what we need financially, but to also know that we're not alone and know that this takes time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you talk about budget being a dirty word for me, and time is a dirty, I hate when people say, just give it time. But it's the reality.
Yeah.
Give yourself some space, give yourself some time, take care of yourself. And again, thank you so much for being on, Tim.
Thanks for all you do. Thanks for having me.